Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there. A few announcements and reminders. The new round of support groups are underway. They started last week. And wow, what a great group of human beings who have shown up with their big brave and their their knees knocking and their wounded hearts exposed, and they've shown up and they're ready to dive in and do the work to help move things along on their estrangement journey and or reconciliation journey. If you're interested in joining the next round of support groups that we'll have, these groups run for 8 weeks at a time. So there are new groups that begin every 10 weeks or so. I usually try to take a couple of weeks off in between each group. So the next group will begin in September. If you're interested in joining that group, please email me so you can get on the wait list for that. I do keep these groups small so that we can have enough time to support everyone in the group. They are not large. They are maximum of 10 people, minimum of 5. And I just find that it really works really, really well when support group members can feel safe enough and vulnerable enough to be able to share their experience and to receive support for that. And oftentimes with big groups, folks can get a little overwhelmed. So we keep it really small. So if you'd like to join, please do so. Email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com and I'll happy to get you on the list. And let's see, if you're looking for individual coaching support as we move into the month of July, I have opened up an additional 3 spots to my schedule. And so if you're interested in individual one-on-one coaching, private coaching, please also email me for additional information on that. Or you can go directly to the website and book a session with me directly there. And I believe that is theestrangedheart.com /work with Kreed. Anyway, it's under the services page on the website. So if that is of interest to you, like I said, I've opened 3 additional slots for 3 new clients. So I believe that is all for today. I know we're ending. Today's the last day of June. We're entering summer months and folks are traveling and doing all their things. Or maybe you're like me and you're sitting inside because it's 185 degrees outside and that's not pleasant for anyone. So I hope wherever you are, whatever you are doing, you are finding inspiration and you're staying cool. So on to today's episode. Today's episode is titled, My Daughter-in-Law Has Broken Our Family, the Myth of the Gatekeeper. And before we dive into that, today's quote, the magic you are waiting for is in the work you are avoiding. That is by Chris Williamson. And I'll say that again. The magic you are waiting for is in the work you are avoiding. By Chris Williamson. So the term gatekeeper, I don't know if it was coined by, but I first heard it when Dr. Coleman used it. And it's become, I've used it in the past, it's become a label. Don't like labels. Um, that a lot in the world of estrangement have been using. And while I have used it in the past, it's been in an effort to draw attention to a particular episode or information. And so that's why I used it today, along with the myth of the gatekeeper. There's a reason why I titled it that way. So, without fail, in all of my support groups, there is always at least one parent who is having an issue with a daughter in law or a son in law. And when I say issue, what I am meaning is that the parent, believes that the daughter in law or son in law are causing the estrangement, that the daughter in law or son in law are the ones who have stepped in, they are gatekeeping the adult child from their parent, and they have placed boundaries and quote unquote ridiculous boundaries around grandchildren and access to the adult child and that sort of thing. And I'm here to tell you that the cases where that is actually factual are few and far between. I know, you're going to come after me and you're going to say, "Oh, but you don't know, Kreed." Yeah, it's a fact. It's a truth with our family, because before he or she, the daughter-in-law or son-in-law, came into the picture, everything was fine. And I'm going to ask you to put that perspective and belief aside for a moment and invite in compassionate curiosity, because I think that there's much more going on here than what meets the eye. And when we can get beneath the surface behaviors, we can begin to uncover what is actually happening. And oftentimes, it's not a hateful act, it's not a willingness or a desire to control another human being. It's coming from a place of pain. Okay? So, again, just for this little episode, I'm asking you to set that aside, that belief that this person who has come into your family is the one and only person, the sole responsibility lies squarely on their shoulders for the issues within your family today. Okay, I'm asking you to set that aside for a moment and invite in compassionate curiosity. Could there be something else going on that I haven't seen, that I'm not aware of, that I haven't looked at before, right? So, when I ask you to invite in compassionate curiosity, I'm asking you to expand your perspective and be able to entertain the idea that there are other things happening beneath the surface. What could some of those things be, right? A whole host of things. When we're looking at merging families, when there's been a marriage or a partnership with our adult child and someone else, we are merging our family with that person. That person is merging their family with ours. Okay? So each of us, each of these families are coming together, having had their own experiences, their own familial experiences, right? So they're bringing with them, if we go back to the analogy that I use often, of the little red wagon, right? Imagine your son and daughter, your son or daughter at the altar getting married to this daughter-in-law or son-in-law, and they're each standing there with their own little red wagons right beside them. And inside these little red wagons are all their family history, boxes of childhood memories, boxes of young adulthood memories, um, all the sports they played, the ballets they attended. Like, I mean, just, boxes stacked on top of boxes on top of boxes in this little red wagon. So now I want you to picture those family members that are generally sitting on the front row, right, at a wedding. Each one of those people have their own little red wagon that's also sitting in front of them. So all of these little red wagons come together, and what generally happens is that there's just this big boom, and all of these boxes kind of go flying up in the air, and some of them land and open up, and all kinds of stuff spills out and all of that. And that's kind of my analogy of what happens when we merge families. All of the family histories are merging together, and there's bound to be some sort of discord. There's bound to be boxes that tumble open and spill out, and some of us are left going, oh my God, I am so embarrassed that people I don't know are seeing this. And then there are other people who are going, oh my God, I had no idea all of this stuff was going on in the family, in their family, right? So keep that in mind as we work through this episode and talking about the myth of the gatekeeper. So we come into this relationship with a daughter-in-law and son-in-law with our own history. They come into it with their own histories, right? They have their perspective of their what a family should look like, should be like, should act like, etc. And then they also come with their own perspective of what their family, this new family, is going to be like. And that perspective might not necessarily be accurate, or there might be expectations that the new family can't live up to, or there could be expectations that are totally normal, but because of the other family's history and dysfunction, it's not allowed to play out, right? So there are things that are coming with this person. And then we have and I'll just state it here at the beginning. There is a way to learn how to manage this type of relationship, and the way to manage it for the parent is to step fully 100% into the role of a consultant versus manager. Without fail, those families that have the parents who have issues with their adult child's partner, it's generally when they're coming from that perspective of managing. They want to manage their child. They want to manage the grandchildren. They want to manage how what they're permitted to do or not do. They want to manage all the things, right? So we'll cover a little bit of that in just a moment. So first of all, I want to start with the parent. What are your expectations of this new in-law? Well, and you might say, well, Kreed, I never had expectations. I had dreams. And I'd say, okay, tell me what your dreams were, because your dreams are actually your expectations. Okay? So, what were those dreams? What did you dream of your relationship with your daughter-in-law or son-in-law? What did you think that was going to look like? And then I want you to imagine for just a second, you created this dream without the input of that daughter-in-law or son-in-law. So this is your dream. These are your expectations that are being placed now on another individual who had no input, no say, no nothing. Because generally we have these expectations well before our children marry, right? We have this, we have this thing we think it's going to look like A, B, and C when our kids get married. I know I did. I had a dream of living down the street or at least within about a 5 or 10 minute drive of my adult children and, zipping by to pick up the grandkids and dropping off dinners and all of this lovely, relationship with my son-in-laws. Or if my children had been gay or lesbians, then my daughter-in-law. But those were my dreams. And those were things that I came up with well before my daughters began dating and then let alone marrying. Okay? So I'm just asking you to get a little curious about that. What were those dreams? And then what were your dreams, aka expectations, of your role as a mother-in-law? Because I'm here to tell you that your perspective of that is generally vastly different than your daughter or son-in-law's perspective. Right? And remember, your daughter-in-law or son-in-law did not sign up for your perspective and your dreams. Right? They have no knowledge of that. So we're placing something upon them they have no information about and no consent for. And that is what a manager does. A manager, when we're managing our children, they're not permitted to give consent, right? We're telling them what to do. We're telling them how to do it. When we're in the role of a consultant, our children can give consent or not give consent. Okay. And then another piece to this is, what was your own relationship with your mother-in-law? And I would also say, what was your relationship with your mother? With your own mother? Because those two relationships, the relationship with your mother and the relationship with your mother-in-law, play into your dreams / expectations of your role as a mother-in-law, whether you are aware of it or not. It's playing into that. Okay? So, what were those things? Sometimes we think, oh my gosh, I had a tumultuous relationship with my mother-in-law or my mother growing up. And then when I married my husband's mother, she was just so kind and loving. And she just really guided us and was always there and was in the middle of everything. And that's the kind of mother-in-law I wanted to be. Well, maybe you have a daughter-in-law who's like, I don't want that kind of closeness. I didn't have a good relationship with my mom, and I don't really want a relationship with my mother-in-law. Now, we could get into all sorts of details as to why that is happening. There's a reason why she feels that way about her mother and a reason why she feels like she doesn't want a close relationship with a mother-in-law, and we'll get into that in a moment. But from your perspective, right? What were your dreams and expectations? Because that's running your show with your daughter-in-law. And then what's your relationship been like with your adult child? Is there or has there been codependency in your relationship? And if you don't know what those two words are, look them up, because I often find that in this as well. Perhaps you had an adult child who, for whatever reason, had a sibling or siblings that they had to be the caretaker for, right? And so that's playing into this, how they are looking at things. Sometimes they get when they get married, they're like, "Whoo, I'm out of there now. My mom can take care of my siblings, and I get to go on with my life," kind of thing, right? But yet they're not going to come and tell mom that. And so, because they won't tell mom that, generally the daughter or son in law does it for them in some form or fashion. So, your relational dynamics from your perspective with your adult child, your mother in law? Okay. So, then if we move on, and we do this, we ask the same thing of the daughter or son-in-law. In this case, I'm just going to use daughter-in-law for this example, because that seems to be what I encounter most in my work as an estrangement coach, are mothers that are dealing with daughter-in-laws. So these daughter-in-laws have their own dreams and expectations of what their relationship will look like with their mother-in-law. Maybe they were raised in a home that, where women were super independent, and were not homemakers and things like that. And then they have a mother-in-law who is a homemaker and is used to caretaking in ways that make the daughter-in-law feel very uncomfortable, because she's been hyper independent, as have been most of the women in her life, right? So, what are her dreams and expectations? She's dreaming of coming in, and her husband, your adult child, being able to flit here and there and travel all over the world and raise their children in ways that don't have the restrictions that they had growing up, or being able to give more to them and travel more. And that means not being around grandma much, things like that, right? So, again, she's coming in with her own expectations and dreams. And then we take and look at her own history. And we do this with you, right? We looked at your mother. What's your relationship with your mother, your relationship with your mother in law? So now we're looking at her history. What was the relationship with her mother? What was the relationship, if she was married before, what was her relationship with that ex mother in law? Right? Where has she learned about the relational dynamics between a daughter in law and a mother in law? Has she learned that? Maybe she hasn't. Right? And then we look at her own experience and her own triggers from her own history, personal history, right? Were her parents divorced? Again, what was the relationship with her mother? And remember that you're seeing this through the lens of your perspective, right? So you got to ask yourself, what was her experience of being, let's just call her mom Mary? What was your daughter-in-law's experience being the daughter of Mary? Okay. And then we ask, what is your daughter-in-law's experience from her perspective of being your daughter-in-law? Okay. Oftentimes, when someone from the outside comes into our families, okay, an in-law, they are coming in and looking at our family dynamics from a perspective that no one within our family can generally have, because we're all too close to it. We're all knee deep in it, right? And so this third party person, if you will, this neutral person who is coming into this family, having not experienced this family before, is seeing things that we are blind to. Oftentimes, not in every case, but oftentimes. Because again, we're in it, right? When you're in the picture, you can't see the frame, right? So they'll come in, the daughter-in-law will come in and say to her husband, "Oh my God, what is this crazy relationship that you have with your mother?" And he says, "What are you talking about? Why do you call it crazy? What, I have a typical relationship with my mom like every mother and son have." And the daughter-in-law is his wife is saying, "No, you have an enmeshed relationship with your mother, or you and your mother are so codependent on one another." And because he's lived this his entire life, he doesn't understand how unhealthy that is. He thinks it's normal. You think it's normal. And you think that this person coming in over here is like just, throwing chaos into the family on purpose because she hates you. When in reality, that's not what's happening. Okay. That could be a scenario. Another scenario could be, does she have her parents? Are her parents living? Has she suffered the death of a mother? And if so, what could that perspective of her be of you coming in, quote unquote, to replace her mom? Maybe she's happy, she's good with that, but maybe she's not. Maybe she's scared to death. Maybe she's scared to death to get close to you because then you may die. And then I'm out not one mom, but two moms. And oftentimes when we fear losing someone, a lot of people will push that person away before the other person goes away on their own or through death or things like that, right? So maybe she's actually just scared to death to get close, because every time she gets close to someone, another female, perhaps, that person exits her life for reasons out of anyone's control. We don't know what is happening beneath the surface. Maybe she watched her mother have a horrific relationship with her own mother-in-law. And now she's too scared to quote unquote go there. Or maybe she sees the dysfunction in your family and she's wanting more and better for her family with your son. And that's okay. It's okay for someone to want something different than what you grew up with. It's okay for that person to not want what you want. Here's another thing that can happen in families. Let's say your family is one that is, you know, big and loud and, you know, lots of people coming and going, people talking over each other, and that's normal, right? It's your normal. You don't think twice about it. But she comes from a small family, and a family that's very quiet, family that doesn't talk, family that doesn't yell, doesn't shout to be heard. And so your family is very overwhelming to her nervous system, right? So that's something vastly different than what she's used to. And maybe she doesn't know how to cope with that. Maybe it scares her. Maybe it actually puts her into a state of anxiety, right? And so her actions and behaviors might reflect what you would label as rude when she's like, "Oh my gosh, I just have to get out of here cuz my anxiety is through the roof and I just can't sit here one more minute listening to all of this chaos. I don't know what to do with it." Meanwhile, you've labeled her as rude, right? The opposite. Maybe she comes from a big loud family and your family has always been small and quiet and demure, and you know nobody expresses how they feel, and she's all about expressing how she feels regardless of whose feelings might be hurt or what have you, because that's just what was done in her family. And so she lets it fly, and you have now taken offense to everything that she has said straight off the cuff without asking or thinking about, I wonder why she's that way. Could that be because that's how she was raised? Could that be because that's what she's learned in the world? Maybe she was in a big family and the only way to be heard was to yell and scream and get in someone's face, right? I'm not saying that's healthy, but before we go around slapping labels on people and, calling them rude and, she's evil and she's just a bitch and she's this, that, and the other thing. Whoa, whoa. Do we want people doing that to us? I don't want that. I did that with one of my son in laws. I labeled him from the very beginning, and it was one of the biggest mistakes I had ever made. And I went back later and I apologized. I wrote a letter of apology to him. And he fully embraced me at that point. And we have never had an issue since. But I had to stop and take a look at this person may or may not be the person I would have chosen for my child. This might not be a person I would want to live with. But you know what? That's none of my business. It's none of my business as a parent. What my business is supporting my child in what makes her happy. And that's the route I took. That's when I stepped fully from the manager into the consultant role. Our children are allowed to have lives of their own. They are allowed to marry who they want to marry. They are allowed to partner with whomever they would like to partner with. Our job, in my opinion, our job is to support our children in their dreams. They get to live their life the way they want to. My job is to figure out how can I be in relationship with my daughter or son-in-law in a way that can help my child to feel safe and accepted for their choices, right? That's my job. My job is to be there should that marriage or partnership fall apart. My job is not to say, "Oh, honey, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you left him because I just knew from the beginning that this wasn't going to work and now things are so much better and now you can just move on with your life." No, no, with a capital N. My role is to say, "I am so sorry, honey, that your heart is breaking. What do you need from me?" You don't throw the other person under the bus. You don't throw your adult child's feelings and emotions under the bus because now you're happy because they're divorcing or what have you. Right? Same thing with your grandchildren. Those are not your children. They're not. They are your son and daughter-in-law's children. And as such, they get to make choices on what happens with their children. If we are moving from the manager role to the role of the consultant, we will ask what they want us to do or not do in relation to our grandchildren. We will ask what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And then we will follow what they say, regardless of how crazy we think it is. That is how you show respect to the other person. And I'm here to tell you, if you show respect to that person, to that daughter-in-law or that son-in-law, you will have few, if any, issues with them. Unless it is a sincere form of, some sort of domestic abuse that's going on. Right? If that's going on in the house of, the marriage of your child, your adult child, and your in-law, then that is a different matter. And even with that, I would tell you that I believe, unless there's, physical harm and things where law enforcement would be called in, even in situations like that, I feel like the best course of action you can do to help your adult child is to be there for them, not to throw the other person under the bus, not to force your adult child to leave that person, not to guilt trip your adult child to leave that person, not to guilt trip your grandchildren to do things they know that they shouldn't be doing because their mom has told them not to. To not say, "Oh, it's just our little secret. We don't have to let mom know." No, that's not being respectful. Right? And I have worked with mothers who have issues with daughters-in-law, and they've been able to resolve those as soon as they begin showing respectful dialogue in communication and respectful actions to their daughter-in-law, regardless of how they may feel about them. And when they can dig in and get beneath the surface, they can begin to learn what are the behaviors that are driving this daughter-in-law or son-in-law. Why are they doing what they're doing? As I have said over and over again, behaviors are, they're telling you something. And it's not what's on the surface. It's what's beneath the surface. Sometimes we have to allow our children to face their experiences on their own. And our job is to stand back and support our adult children and or their marriage, right? And their marriage and their partnership. You're not married to them. Your adult child is. And your adult child gets to determine who they want to spend their life with. At the same time, they also get to reap the rewards of that or the opposite. They have to take accountability for the choices they've made if it doesn't work out for them. Right? So I don't agree with the title of Gatekeeper. I think also, I posted something in my group this just a few days ago about what our perception of our adult children, right? Let me find it here. How we see and describe adult children determines how we relate to them. How do you perceive the adult children in your life? And I could turn this around and say, how we see and describe our daughter in law or son in law determines how we relate to them. How do you perceive the daughter in law or son in law in your life? If you perceive your daughter in law to be a gatekeeper, that it is the only way you have access to your adult child, the only way, that she's blocking this and she's blocking that and she's doing this and she's doing that. If that is how you perceive her to be, that is how she will show up for you every single time. Every single time. If you perceive her as a human being with a heart and feelings and a history of her own, with her own traumas, her own wounds, her own sorrows, and you respect that, and you respect her role as the spouse of your adult child, she will come around to that. It might take some time. It might not be instantaneous, but it will happen. But it won't happen if you continue to look at her through the perception, through the lens of, well, she's the gatekeeper and I can't have access to my kid because of her. And I'll just throw this in there too. Your adult child is allowing this on some level. If your daughter-in-law or son-in-law is being super nasty to you, and again, there's reasons why they do that if we get to their history and their wounds and things like that. But if your adult child is not standing up and saying, my mom and dad were really good to me as my parents. They are good to me as my parents, and I want a relationship with them. So what do we have to do to get this figured out between the four of us or the three of us or whatever the case may be? If your adult child's not saying that, then I would question why. Why is your adult child allowing some of this? I've heard parents say, well, my son doesn't have a backbone and he's not going to stand up to her. So then my question is, why doesn't he have a backbone? Why doesn't he have a backbone? Where did he learn that behavior? And I will also say something else that tends to not sit well with many parents, but I've seen it over and over and over and over again. We generally marry one of our parents because there's emotional work that we've got to work out and patterns to break and cycles to break and things like that. And because it's what we know. It's what we know and feel as love. So oftentimes our children will marry someone like us or someone like their father. So just food for thought. And I'm telling you that because I've seen it in my own personal life. Okay? I know this was a lot, and I know that this was truth talking today. So if you've made it this far, I applaud you. This is not easy work. It's hard, it's difficult, it's emotionally taxing, and it forces us to look at things that we would much rather shove under the rug. But I'm here to tell you, shoving it under the rug is only going to cause a big pile that people are going to be tripping over and hurting themselves on. It's much better to sling the carpet back and begin sweeping those piles out. That means in order to do that, we have to look at it. We have to face it. And when we can do that, then we can move into a space that is healthy and clean and pleasant to be around and be in the environment with, etc., etc. Okay? So I want to read something before I close today that one of my support group members, a former support group member, sent me as she is actively working on reconciling with her adult child. She says, I feel like this has been like learning to ride a bike again. My support system is the training wheels, filled with tools and words of encouragement. Next step is to be on one trainer, leaning on it as needed as I gain confidence and skill, practicing over and over until I could keep my balance on my own. Quote unquote, doing the work, putting it into action. The third step is to take the trainer off, knowing I've got this. Here I go, hearing my support group cheer for me. Keeping my bike in good working order with maintenance, i.e., therapy, friends, listening to podcasts while riding. I really have learned that I can do hard things, and it doesn't always have to be all by myself. I can fall and still get back on the ride. Life is beautiful, and I'm here to enjoy the ride in all the different terrains I will encounter. Estrangement is a huge and dangerous mountain trail, my toughest ride yet. Your podcast is the map I use to navigate which direction I need to go. It led me back to myself again. Your perspective truly led me to a different way to view what was happening in my life. I'm proud of this mom. She's doing the work, and she's all in, and she's scared to death. And she's like, but I'm moving forward. So I want to applaud her efforts. I want to applaud all the efforts of all the parents who are digging in to do the work, helping to break generations of cycles that have been unhealthy. I recognize how big this work is. I also know that it can be done when you are supported and you are encouraged along the way. If you would like coaching support to help you on your path of estrangement and or reconciliation, please feel free to reach out. You can email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com, or you could go directly to the website, theestrangedheart.com, to book a direct appointment. Until next time. This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.